Hey folks, it's Nashwauk Steve here. In today's video, we are going to be replacing the impeller and wear ring on our 2004 Sea Doo GTX 4Tech. I'll give you a little history on the machine. We just bought this thing within the last month or so. Mint condition, 74 hours. The thing looks perfect for being almost 20 years old. Great looking machine. Took it out in the water for the first time and it was just really slow out of the hole, real sleepy, wouldn't get past 38 miles per hour. This thing should do much more than that. It's 155 horsepower, so it shouldn't have any problem breaking 40 and probably 50, maybe 60. So I started to do some investigation and I'll show you some still images of what I found when I started to look underneath there at the jet pump. So in that first picture, you could see rocks that were stuck in the vanes in the backside of the jet pump. Pulled these things out of there. They were all wedged in there. Who knows how many actually passed through without getting stuck. But apparently someone rode this thing really shallow and picked up a lot of rocks and probably did some damage to the impeller and the wear ring. And then the next picture I show, you can see it's from looking at the intake grates back, and you can see a lot of light around the edge of the impeller, showing that there's a lot of wear on that wear ring, a lot of gap on the outside. That's what's causing the poor performance. Instead of all the water being forced directly out, you're getting a lot of spray, a lot of turbulence around that outside of that impeller, making it really slow out of the hole. So that's what gave me the clues that we need to go ahead and work on this thing and get this fixed up. Okay, here's a look at the parts and pieces we're planning on using for this job. First and foremost, we have the new impeller. I bought a Solas impeller. I matched it to the stock version for my jet ski, which is SRCD11/19. That comes with a couple different boots there to go on it. And then you can buy it with or without the impeller removal tool. If you don't have one, you'll need one specific to your impeller. It drops in there and it gives you instructions on how to remove it. Have the wear ring. I'm going to be using some marine grease as well. I've seen other instructions that say use a triple guard grease or different kinds of marine grease. I'm going to go with this one here that I've got. I'm going to be replacing the O-rings on one of the water, I think it's an intake line. You'll see it there when we pull off part of the jet pump. Some Loctite thread locker and some XPS jet pump bearing grease. Because this machine is almost 20 years old, I don't know when it was last worked on, so we're going to be prepared to put new grease in that jet pump bearing as well. The only other thing I don't have shown here is some anti-seize. I forgot to grab that, but there are some places that call for anti-seize. I'll go ahead and put that on there as well. Okay, here's the plan. First, we're gonna put that reverse gate down. We're gonna take off the hose right up there, just a hose clamp. We'll take off the 10mm nut for the reverse bucket, and we'll take off the steering nut as well there. Then that'll take care of what's connected to the IBR, and then after that, we'll get into the larger nuts that are back there. There's 4 of them. We'll need an extension to get on those, and we'll take those off as well. And that should release everything that we need to get released, including this steering bracket I guess we have under there too. Let's get to it. Okay, now I've got the 17mm socket with a bunch of extension on there to get the main mounting bolts out for the jet pump. Okay, so there's my jet pump that pulled out really easily. Here's the aftermath of what's left in there. I can see the little boot didn't come out, so we can pull that out. Just wiggle it off that shaft there, and it obviously needed to be replaced. That was kind of wrecked, so good thing we got extra ones of those, or a new one with that impeller. It's a good time to clean stuff up too. There was a bunch of weeds on the shaft up there, to kind of get some of the sand, dirt cleared out there, and that's what you have. When you're done pulling that, you should have 4 flat washers and 4 lock washers that kind of drop out as you pull the jet pump. So now let's get this thing onto the workbench and get to work on it. Okay, at this point, the wearing is going in the deep freeze. Got to get it as cold as we can because we're relying on shrinkage of that thing to get it to fit into the jet pump. Okay, here we are. We have the jet pump assembly on the workbench, so we're going to start assembling it. First thing to do is to take out these 4 bolts here that are holding the nozzle, or the venturi, sorry, this is the nozzle, venturi onto the pump. Get those out and see what we have inside there. So if you've never taken the venturi off of your pump before, these bolts can be kind of tough. So just be ready for that when you do it. Not terrible, but they take a lot of force to get them started. And finding a place to kind of brace it was a challenge. But I think I got that figured out. So. Okay, while we're at this stage, let's take a closer look at my suspicion and my issue with this jet ski. So like I saw from underneath, it looked like there was a lot of gap, and sure enough, you can see there's plenty of gap around the outside there. Then move it, you can see different places where there's, I mean, it's a solid 1/8 inch back there. And you can see all the rings in the wear ring as well. Some bent pieces on the impeller too that are gonna affect the efficiency of it. Really big gap there. You're gonna get a close look at it as I spin it around. It gets better and worse, but certainly not good. It's really bad. So that's gonna throw your efficiency way off. So I think I'm on the right track here with what was wrong. Man, there's some big pits back there too in that wearing. So let's go ahead and figure out how to get this thing all the way out. Okay, the Solas impeller came with some directions. So remove the jet pump, done. Remove the trail cone from the stator. So that's what we're doing right now. Just an Allen head. These are pretty easy to move. They're not that tight in there. So we'll take that out and see what the grease looks like inside there. So what I see here, the grease looks pretty good. I mean, I think there's probably supposed to be more than that in there, but it's packed in there pretty well into the bearing. I'm gonna wipe it all out because I have extra grease. That was this stuff that I bought. So maybe I'll put it to use. We'll clean that up and then we'll follow the directions here for getting that impeller off. Okay, so on one end of this, we're gonna have the impeller removal tool. I have it right there, stuck in. The other side's got this Allen head. Okay, this impeller was rusted on to that shaft really badly. It took me a lot of time to get this loosened up. I tried a bunch of different tools because I didn't have the right tool. So I'm gonna recommend that if you don't have a right tool, which is a 12mm hex head socket, you need to get one. I tried everything I could. Broke my vise, broke a rebar piece that I made to fit in. Then I welded a bolt to fit exactly into that shaft receiver there, that hex shaft. That broke on me. Finally went into town the next day, bought the right tool, 1/2 inch drive, 12mm hex head. And with a lot of force, I was able to get it off, but it came off. So we're able to remove this and keep going on with the job. So. Okay, the next thing to do is take off these 2 little 8mm bolts here, or little machine screws or something. Get rid of those. The other thing I took off too while I was working on that impeller was the rubber ring that goes around the top of this thing like that. Just make sure that's off, make sure it's in good shape. Oh, and don't forget the other 2 screws that are underneath this double tube here. Right there, I take those out too. Okay, I first tried the freezer method, throwing this whole thing in the freezer for like an hour, taking it out, using a hair dryer to heat the outside of it, hoping to get the inside to stay cold enough to get the outside to expand a little bit. I didn't have any luck doing that. I heard some popping and that kind of thing, but it never actually got loose. So now we're gonna go ahead and use Dremel. I've seen this method online before. You cut 2 slits and then you kind of chip out the middle piece. Credit to something like Today We Wrench, I think that's the guy, so thank you for that. Go ahead and try that method and see if we can get this old wearing out of here. Here we go. All right, that came out pretty well with the Dremel. Now we're gonna do some cleanup time on this thing. Okay, so now we're gonna get the new wearing out of the freezer and we're gonna put it in to the jet pump, just like this. Hopefully it slides in fairly easily. Oh, look at that. Like a glove. So that's in tight. Now we'll let it warm up and expand, and then we'll be putting in those other little keeper screws on either side too, just to make sure it stays in place, but that went in really well. Don't need to pound it. Okay, while I'm letting that new ring expand, I'm going to go ahead and inspect and lube up these O-rings that are inside here. Make sure the grease stays in that bearing like it's supposed to. These look like they're in pretty good shape, so I'm just going to clean them up, put them back in. Get the races, everything cleared out in here, where those things seat, and make sure we're looking good for when things go back together. Okay, we're going to put that rubber gasket back on this part of the, around the wearing again here. Just seal that up nice. Just like that. Okay, and then also while we're sitting here, I'm gonna look at these O-rings here for the, I think it's the baler they call it. I'm gonna pick those out. I got new ones, so we're gonna, yeah, that one's actually broken, so glad I put new ones in. Okay, now we're gonna put those little retaining screws back in to hold the wearing in place. The reason I waited on that was just because I had this terrible vision in my mind of me putting these screws into a freezing cold wearing and cracking it or something. So I don't want that to happen. So we waited a little while, but now it's had some time, so should be okay. Okay, just a little note on these screws that I put in here. Once I put them in, I noticed I could actually see it was deforming the wearing a little bit. So I really don't think it needs those to stay. So I just put them in just barely snug onto the wearing, but not enough to move it in. I don't want to mess with that dimension there. So they're there, they're doing something, but they're not tightened down all the way. Now we're gonna get that impeller back on. So I'm gonna use some anti-seize on that shaft, so me or the next person doesn't have such a hard time like I did getting it off. Got it all cleaned up. I'll put some of this on there. Nice and happy like that. Okay, and go ahead and slip this thing on this side and see what we get. Okay, get that in there nicely. Now we need the impeller removal tool. There we go. Now impeller installer tool. On the opposite side, we'll put the wrench at this ratchet with the 12mm hex head on it. Start threading this on. Okay, so I hear the spec on clearance is 0.35 millimeters. So that's what the feeler gauges I have here. Fits in a couple places here and there. Most places it doesn't, which is good. The impeller spins nicely, so we're meeting spec everywhere there. I'd say this is looking pretty good. I'll check it a little different, a little smaller size here. Here we're using a 0.25. Still some places where it doesn't slip in. There it does. There it does. So I'd say that's probably about the average we have is a 0.25 or so. So looking pretty good there. Feeling good about it. Okay, now we can put the bolts back on for the cone. Give those a little bit of Loctite. Take a little bit to line up the hole. Flip those two new O-rings on here. A little bit of spare grease from I took out of that cone. Okay, now we put the Venturi back on. Just make sure to line up the top holes with the where we put those gaskets, O-rings. Put the line it up with the tube that's there for the baler. Got the 4 bolts to put back in with some Loctite as well. It's a good idea to clean the threads before you put these back in, because there's probably going to be some old thread locker in there as well, which there was on these. So, okay, with this Venturi, we're gonna go ahead and torque it down according to a spec that I saw of 15. We'll see how that feels. Right there. Yeah, it felt about right. We'll go with that all the way around. I don't have the exact manual for this, so I'm just going off of some other information I've seen online. 19-year-old jet ski. I'm not gonna necessarily do everything according to shop standards, but okay, with those tightened down, we head out to the ski, put this thing back in. Okay, there's a little prep in here. This drive shaft here, I'm just gonna put a heavy amount of marine grease on there, and then also on the boot that goes on the other side. I forgot to show that before, but there's a boot that goes on the impeller that should come with your new impeller. We'll put a lot of grease in there too, so it slides on nicely and aligns with those splines. We'll go ahead and get that hoisted in here and then start getting the rest of it back together. I already brushed it off, so now we're just going to put on some marine grease. There's that boot I was talking about that I didn't show before. Some grease on these O-rings in there, so that'll slide on superbly. Okay, now we'll get this thing up and in place, just trying to keep free of the other stuff that's around it here. There we go. Okay, now I'm going to put a little Loctite on each of those bolt studs that are sticking out there. And then one flat washer, one lock washer, and a nut on each one. These are really hard to get to by hand, so I'm using my extension there, putting the Loctite in the threads of the nut and a little on the face of it too, so it'll kind of get in there. Like that. Then you can poke it back there and get it right on there without having to get your hands far end up. Okay, we're taking these to
24 foot-pounds. Right there. In a cross pattern. Okay, now we just got to connect the reverse cable and the steering cable. Bolt underneath. We're getting pretty close to the end here. And don't forget the little 13mm down here that needs to connect up to. Then we need to get this hose reattached back up here. Takes a little bit of finagling to get that back where it needs to go, but that shouldn't be too bad. Back up there. Just use a flathead to tighten up that hose clamp.
All right, so that's it for this job. Thanks for watching. I guess there's one final step, which would be taking this out for a water test to make sure that it improved the performance of it, which is the thing I'm going to do next as soon as I get a warm enough day. I'll be sure to videotape it and include it as part of this video. Other than that, thanks for watching. I hope it was helpful. Okay, we're out here on the maiden voyage after I replaced the impeller. Let's see what she's got.